This video is brought to you by Keeps. Stick around to hear more about the discount that they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, today I want to dive back into the realm of console hardware because I recently discovered a key upcoming addition to the PS5 middleware toolkit, which will offer Denuvo to game developers. For anyone who doesn't already know, Denuvo is not a popular program. The primary focus on PC oscillates between anti-cheat and, more critically, anti-tamper software. The basic premise is that PC games can be hacked, changed, modified, stolen, and more, so Denuvo steps in with a piece of security software embedded into the game itself, which protects against that sort of activity. It doesn't really protect against it, side note. Most games still get cracked wide open within like a week at most, but at the very least it preserves the integrity for a few days on and around launch day, so maybe that helps with sales on PC rather than an onslaught of torrenting. I'm not sure. Denuvo falls under the acronym DRM, or Digital Rights Management. Now, I'm of the mindset that anything you put on the internet is inherently free by default, for those who know how to make it free at least, which will inevitably apply to every single piece of digital content ever made. Someone always figures out how to break it. That's just the truth online. So we should honestly lean into that, in my opinion, and make payment somewhat optional. I'm also a fan of hard copy game discs, not digital purchases, but that's an entirely separate video. But I understand that when large products get produced, this is always going to be true, probably, they need to be sold to recoup costs, not given away for free, so I get that. I understand from a very basic perspective why DRM software exists. I understand why it gets employed on PC, even when it will inevitably be cracked within a few days, even like 24 hours sometimes. And I understand that the concept isn't going anywhere. But what I don't understand is why this would be coming to PS5, because PC and PS5 are entirely different platforms with entirely different structures, and I legitimately do not even see a positive application for Denuvo on the PlayStation system. At its core, there's a kind of fundamentally insulting truth about DRM. That truth is lost on a lot of people because they, understandably, don't want to read hours and hours of TOS agreements and click through contracts in order to get the full picture. But the simple way to put it is that when you buy a digital game, you are merely buying a temporary license to access that game. That license can be revoked at any time, for any reason, for whatever they decide, and DRM often exists to help make that possible. Imagine if you bought like a car, for example, but there was a mechanism embedded in the engine of the car itself so that the dealer could just flip a switch and render it entirely useless in perpetuity at will, but kept all of your money in the process. That type of invention would cause a massive uproar well and truly beyond what Denuvo has ever sparked itself, but the conceptual similarity is not actually too far off. Sure, digital versus physical or analog. Yes, it gets cracked very quickly, like extremely quickly sometimes. No, it's not often used in that way and not always designed for that specific purpose, but there's an inherent messaging here where a customer pays $60, soon to be $70, industry average, and then gets anti-tamper software shoved down their throat because the publisher is openly proclaiming to everyone, "We don't trust any of you, and we want to restrict you as much as possible for as long as possible." That's not a great relationship for those who know what's really going on here. All right, time for me to pay the bills because YouTube is currently not on the let's give upper echelon quality advertisements train. 96% of the people watching this video are men between the age of 18 and 45. 80% of men experience hair loss, and a significant amount of them even before the age of 35. Effectively, all of you watching this make me the perfect channel for a hair loss prevention ad, so here you go. Keeps can prevent hair loss, and they have partnered with the channel for a massive discount. It can be delivered right to your home, no doctor's visit required, and the link down below, keeps.com/UEG, will save you 50% on your first purchase. Some men will even experience hair growth while using Keeps, not just loss prevention. They also have more 5-star reviews than any competing product I could find, so again, 50% off your first purchase using the link down below. That's keeps.com/UEG, 50% off first purchase. Big thank you to them for sponsoring the channel. Okay, so having established that Denuvo on PC is anti-cheat/anti tamper software, most critically, we need to now underscore that it absolutely can and verifiably has affected performance. This is not a guaranteed phenomenon, though it is quite common on PC, honestly, but the effects of bloating the software with programs that call back to outside databases constantly or run internal scans and checks with a high frequency. I'm not an expert, so if my terminology is wrong here, please correct me down below in the comment section. Having software that does these things and more during gameplay can negatively impact the overall experience. That's mostly a factor of the anti-tamper side of things, but not entirely. From what I have gathered, that can be the main culprit, but a lot of the specifics depend on implementation from the developer side of things. So the software is possible to use without drastically harming the player's experience, but it really ends up going case by case. Now, most of what I've said applies to PC primarily, so why am I saying this when Denuvo is coming to PS5? And the answer is actually a bit unexpected. I'm saying this because PS5 and PC are so profoundly different. I don't see a reason why Denuvo would ever need to exist on that platform, aside from a rather nefarious conspiracy theory I tend to believe might actually be real, but more on that later. PC has a hacking problem. There's no skirting around that subject. Online multiplayer games are dominated by hacks and cheats, often sold through various e-commerce portals for massive profit. And you can't exactly go very far without encountering someone utilizing those broken mechanics. However, PC is an open platform, which enables free access to files and code, while PlayStation is not. Think of your PC as a multi-tool. You can open a whole bunch of the individual components, use them for different purposes, and even put new ones into the tool if you feel like it, but PlayStation isn't the same. PlayStation consoles are like a simple jackknife, honestly. They play games. That's mostly it. They can be hacked by moderately expert programmers, but the number of people able and willing to do that is so incredibly small, there is no conceivable point to focusing on that demographic in your development cycle. Even if someone is able to hack the PlayStation infrastructure and modify various bits of code here and there, redistributing the compromised games is next to impossible on that platform. The PlayStation Network itself is a closed system. It's not like PC, and therefore the anti-tamper components of Denuvo are quite literally totally useless. However, since Denuvo has a second pillar of their software, which is Anti-Cheat, one might still find a way to defend this as a good idea of some kind. Well, it isn't a good idea. In fact, it's a flat-out useless idea, again, because you can't really run modified code on the system at all. Again, caveat, if you're a black hat expert hacker or something like that, nothing is off limits to you. If it has any code whatsoever, you can pretty much hack anything in the world that has software, but that's a practically non-existent demographic in this equation. Bottom line, PlayStation versus PC is like an iPhone versus Android. It's an extremely loose comparison. Okay, I know it's imperfect. One you can easily modify, one is locked down tight or somewhat tight. Sure, there are ways to break into the one that is locked down, but in the case of PlayStation, that is an exceptionally rare occurrence, and Denuvo is not in a position where it would do anything worthwhile. Instead, Denuvo is in a position where it could possibly hurt the performance of games with no real upside, because despite the fact that the anti-tamper portion is not included in this particular case, it still heavily relies on developer implementation. How they do it matters a great deal, and if they do it wrong or in an overly aggressive manner, it will impact how the game plays. One more preemptive response here before I get to the conspiracy side of things, which I think is much more fun and honestly more accurate probably. Some people might look at this with a hope that it will prevent DDoS attacks. DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service, and unfortunately that's a common occurrence on console when you look at competitive games. The chain of events is actually pretty simple. A competing player scrapes your IP address. There's a bunch of different ways to do this from what I understand. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I just know that they can do this in a myriad of different ways. And the only real way to stop it is to use a VPN. They then literally just plug your IP into certain websites online, or for more advanced users, link it to a personal network of different machines and use the combined power of multiple different, PCs to hit you offline. I believe that's the terminology, which makes your internet either fluctuate or become flat out useless and unusable, thereby destroying your experience, and they can have an advantage in the game or just win because you disconnect. Denuvo will not do anything at all to help with this, period. Denuvo cannot possibly combat this type of attack, and the only real defense anyone has is to use a VPN, virtual private network. Hilariously, I probably should have included my VPN sponsor in this video. That would be a really good fit, but that's coming early next week. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us right where we started. Denuvo is effectively useless on console. The only thing it might do is negatively impact performance, depending on how the developers choose to implement it. Now, if I'm somehow missing the point of this software on console, please let me know. I really don't see a reason for it to be there, but I could be missing something pretty big. I looked around for quite a while, and the only defenses I heard seemed to be entirely misinformed. The people saying that, it should be there, or trust Sony, none of them gave a valid reason that I could find. So yeah, I don't see a single reason for Denuvo to exist on PlayStation at this point in time. And I don't think it will hugely impact the games that it gets crammed into, because the anti-tamper portion isn't even included. But it easily could, and with no actual payoff on the other side of the scale, impact performance. So again, I see no reason for this to be a thing. Well, I say I see no reason for that to be a thing, but in reality, I actually kind of do see a reason. This part's conspiracy, maybe speculation is a better word. Either way, it's not rooted in anything I can empirically prove. It's more so a gut feeling with some guesses on top that seem rather logical, but I've been doing this a long time, so I've kind of learned to trust my gut, so take that for what you will. The only implementation payoff on DRM that I can picture, specifically Denuvo in this case, the only one that makes it worthwhile to include on console, even when it only affects an incredibly small number of players, is for single-player games. Now, hear me out here. The best example would be Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I can't prove this, I have no data to back it up, but when playing that game, it very much felt like the experience gain metrics were deliberately balanced, at least during the launch window. I think they got adjusted afterwards, but I wasn't playing anymore, around the sale of a microtransaction to boost those experience gains by 50%. I'm not kidding. The game legitimately felt, in terms of scale, pacing, and unlockables especially, like your basic experience had been throttled down to half of what would otherwise feel comfortable. And then a 50% booster, a permanent 50% booster by the way, was dangled in front of your face to solve that issue. Again, I can't see inside Ubisoft and know if that's true or not, or what they were planning or thinking, but it sure felt that way, and Denuvo, in that type of situation, could prevent those few players from modifying the game themselves and overcoming that hurdle, thereby ensuring the only way out of the deliberate trap is to spend more money. What little hacking has ever occurred on a PlayStation has two different formats. One is multiplayer hacking, where the perpetrator wants an advantage. That's probably the most common as well. Even though most common, I'm saying the wrong words here. That's incredibly rare, like unbelievably rare. But when it does happen, which it really doesn't in the average player's experience, it would probably be aimed at multiplayer hacking and just getting an advantage against other players in PvP scenarios. That's my guess. It might ruin the experience of a few players in the match when it does occur, which is incredibly rare, but the publisher already has everyone's money, so what do they honestly care? The second type of hacking would be akin to what we see on PC with console commands, mods, or cheats, and would primarily focus on single-player games to acquire new resources, items, or abilities. Well, if those resources, items, and abilities are being sold in the store as microtransactions, that's lost revenue for the publisher. Denuvo might actually have a useful application. I say useful with huge air quotes here because it's not actually useful to players. It would mostly just hinder them. But Denuvo might have a useful application when aimed at those who are circumventing the in-game store. Again, I can't prove that. It's just a bit of speculation, but for some reason that's what I keep coming back to, because without that kind of payoff, right, monetary fiscal payoff, why would it ever need to be included in a console game? It might hurt performance, it's very possible. It won't actually solve any issues like Anti-Cheat does on PC, and it certainly won't help with the number one problem that console competitive games have already, which is the DDoS attacks. Instead, it might be used to scrape more money from the few who would otherwise circumvent the store with the knowledge to do so, but even then, it's such a small percentage, how much of a priority could it possibly be? In the end, the piece of PS5 technology that literally no one was ever asking for is Denuvo. There's no point. There is no actual reason to have this stuff in your games on console. And the most hilarious thing, reading from the announcement about this integration that recently happened, quote, "Developed by security experts and video game enthusiasts, Denuvo's technology has no negative impact on in-game performance, and its non-intrusive methodology ensures the developer's workflow is never impacted." End quote. That is just flat out not true. That is a deliberate lie. It's a complete fabrication, and there are so many instances available to showcase how and when Denuvo has been highly intrusive or disrupted workflow. It's actually hilarious that they would even say this. In the end, Denuvo on console is an entirely useless piece of software, unless I'm just completely missing some sort of key implementation here, but I don't think I am. And though it has been offered on PlayStation 4 in the past for quite some time, I see no reason why it should come to PlayStation 5 and be ported over. Genuinely, I have no idea. But that's it. If you want support, there are links down below. Please consider signing up to watch on Odyssey. When I fix my sleep schedule, I'll be doing some early uploads there where the videos will show up maybe 6 or 12 hours before YouTube. Also, check out Locals for $5 a month. You can watch the ad-free versions and get the audio podcast format. There's another gaming YouTuber to check out. Also, Keeps, the sponsor for today, linked down below in the description. Merch, social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.